Hello, and welcome to Talking Toddlers, where I share more than just tips and tricks on how to reduce tantrums or build your toddler's vocabulary. We're going to cover all of that, I assure you. But here, our goal is to develop clarity, because in this modern world, it's truly overwhelming, especially during these past 2 years. This podcast is about empowering moms to know the difference between fact and fiction, to never give up, to tap into everyday activities so your child stays on track. He's not falling behind, he's thriving through your guidance. We know that true learning starts at home, and Talking Toddlers, this podcast helps you develop that with clarity, confidence, and clear communication. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Talking Toddlers. I'm Erin Heyer, your host. And this week, I want to answer the question that I'm given quite often. What would you do, Erin, if you were in my shoes? If you were me and this was your child, what would you do? So I thought I would pull together my top 10 favorites or must-haves if I was a brand new parent today in 2022. If I could take my 35 years of experience as a professional, all of my years of study, because I certainly haven't stopped studying, I continually study child development, other areas of specialization such as occupational therapy, clinical psychology, brain health, gut health, nutrition, mobility, all of those things, because I think it's important anybody that works or lives or is in charge of the youth, we have to continue to ask ourselves questions. Science is never settled. Science is meant to be questioned and challenged. We grow and learn continually as a human race. And so looking at modern day lifestyle, and I use that phrase quite often because I think it's really, really important. How I was raised many, many decades ago was very different than children today. And even as my child 21 years ago is different than today. There wasn't even an iPhone, right? There were flip phones and we all had slider phones or that, but that was all they were. They were just phones. And it's not just technology, it's just our modern day lifestyle. It's technology, food, timing, the school system, all of it is so very different. And we have to continually step back and look at the big picture and then navigate wisely and be specific. So I thought today would be helpful because I do get this question quite often. What would you do, Erin, if you were a brand new mom, or if you had a 3-month-old or a 6-month-old, or even if you had a 2-year-old who was slow to talk? What would you do? So I'm going to run through these quickly, knowing that I could dive deep and I have in the past. So for example, the top 3, which is looking at breastfeeding, tummy time, and baby-led weaning, those 3 I have talked about in episodes number 7, 8, and 9. So if you haven't listened to those, please go back when we're done here. You don't have to have that as a prerequisite, but I do dive deeper into them. So my number 1 top 10 ideal parenting would be, if you can, try your best to breastfeed at least for 6 months. And you could continue to pump and use breast milk. Those are 2 different kind of elements, right? I look at it from that Mother Nature knows best, that babies and mamas are designed by our Creator to give those nutrients. But it's also much more involved, sorry about that, because we can look at the nutrients and the nutrition elements. There are some, 200 different constituents that compose in breast milk. It can vary from woman to woman depending on their health and their well-being overall. It also depends on their own diet and all of those elements. It also depends on the timing. Is it the beginning stages, those first couple of weeks, or are you 3 or 4 months into it? So the breast milk nutrients and nourishments change. There was one study I remember looking recently, and that it changes from region to region. So mother's milk from India tends to have a slightly lower percentage or measurement of fat than, say, the U.S. mothers. And I think it has a lot to do with our lifestyle, the food that we eat and the way that we digest and metabolize food. So just to highlight, the key element that I look at when I look at breast milk is the fat content. So the majority of calories in breast milk is really significant and important in an infant's overall health. It metabolizes, the fat itself helps to metabolize many different vitamins in the digestive tract, and it affects the growth rates. We know this by measuring a breast milk versus formula. We also know that the long chain polyunsaturated fatty acids, what you and I may be familiar with seeing on the supplements, are DHA, that truly supports brain development. And interestingly enough, several years ago, the formula companies started to include DHA in the formula, knowing that it was that important for babies to have it. Unfortunately, they didn't really have big advertisements telling us why and this is important. They just kind of subtly added it. So you look at breast milk regarding nutrients, but I have really stressed the whole breast milk and breastfeeding, which is a different component to it, because of the oral facial development and the oral motor development, and that supports the physical aspect of talking. So if I was a brand new mom, I would do everything I could before you have the baby to learn about breastfeeding and the pros and the cons. And do know that we don't really want feeding to be all super duper easy. We want the muscles to work out. And again, our Creator, our God above, designed the whole relationship between a woman's nipple and breast and a baby's mouth. And I have gone deeper into explaining why and how, and I will continue this conversation. So number one would be looking at breastfeeding and the breast milk, because you get two different positive relationships with early development in that area. Number two would be tummy time. And that is all, again, about having the baby experience a little work, a little effort to stimulate growth, just like it should take work to, not frustration to be to be breastfed, but there should be effort that the baby has to put out in order to gain benefits. And so I guess it was 1992 to 1994 that they really started rolling out the whole tummy time and switching, because, and again, I've explained this a little bit in previous episodes about the SIDS and alleviating that horrific accident, right? So parents need to take it upon themselves to really be educated, not only a little tummy time here and a little tummy time there. It really is the physical support for speech, cognitive development, and language. It builds motor, visual, and sensory development. The core muscles in the neck, the back, and the shoulders all support gross motor and fine motor. And I know that, pediatricians will casually talk about it, and even moms will chat about, a flat head or problems with a twisted neck from laying on their side. And I want moms and dads and primary caretakers to understand the importance of tummy time and to be diligent and vigilant. That it starts right as soon as you get home, bringing that beautiful bundle of joy, and you kind of work up to an hour a day by 3 months of age. You use in small increments, and I will have an episode or two with different specialists talking about the whole tummy time. And again, in our modern day, it's hard to be cognizant, especially if you send them to daycare or if there's a babysitter. You have to really be strategic about building that opportunity into your day-to-day life. So number 3 would be baby-led weaning. And it is relatively new, I'd say about, 10 years, but the last several years, more and more new parents are talking about this ahead of time. We can talk about, breastfeeding and the challenges that might come with that. And then moms and dads are talking about baby-led weaning. I did talk about that in episode number 10, if so you want to go back and listen to that. But it's really important, the timing with that and helping that your baby will kind of give you some cues. Can they sit up and hold themselves with no support, or maybe just a bolster or two? And I've talked about that in episode 10, but how to prop up your child and that they're ready. They can lean forward and open their mouth, and they're eager and interested in foods on your plate. Can they reach forward with a palmar grip, which means that it's not a pincer grip where they can take their index finger and their thumb and pick up things, but they kind of grab things in their whole palm, right? And then bring it to their mouth. So those gross motor skills are really important as a precursor to telling you, I'm ready for some baby-led weanings. And it doesn't mean that you're going to wean them off of the bottle or the breast milk, that you're introducing, giving them opportunities to have different tastes, different textures, and it's those initial chewing and biting, and that is critical. Number 4, read. And in episode number 5, I talked about how do we read to our babies and why do we read? And there are 4 primary purposes, but this would definitely be in my ideal parenting package. It's reading to your baby is about language stimulation, is about building connection and relationship, engagement. It helps them really fine-tune the human voice, their primary language. It provides a script or cue cards for moms or dads or grandparents who feel a little awkward talking to a baby who's just kind of hanging out in their arms. But it's not only baby. You have to, or I strongly encourage parents to read up until they tell you, Mama, I can read this book faster than you can with, it silently in my head. So please go away. That's what my daughter said to me. But she was about 7 or 8, but we read so much throughout her day. It just became part of our daily lifestyle, right? But it helps build routines. It helps calm kids. I use it as kind of a quiet time versus you don't have to take a nap, but you do have to rest. Go and look at some books. It helps the higher order language as they move into stories, and helps attend to spoken language, but it also helps them focus and listen and create imagination inside their own heads. You can also teach lessons, right? I had a little guy in here this morning, and there's a cute little book, and it's like, I can do it all by myself. And he really is beginning to learn how he can do things like put on his shoes and put on his coat and put the toys away all by myself. And it's a very simplistic little story. It's one in which I can kind of paraphrase, and he will fill in the blank. But read is number 4. Number 5, music. I know everybody kind of talks about music, and, there's a lot of myths or rumors, although there have been a lot of studies, but there's not really strong definitive measures that say if you introduce music or kids who play instruments have a higher IQ or better cognition. There is a correlation that musicians tend to have certain personality styles or certain proclivities, and they tend to do better in school. They tend to have higher test scores, whatever that might mean. But really, from a language and an early child development perspective, I look at that music really is brain stimulation. It helps networks process the rhythm, the timbre, the tone. And we do have functional MRIs that have demonstrated how when kids listen to music, there's certain areas of the brain that light up, such as the auditory. That makes sense, right? But also the motor skills and the emotions and the creative elements in the brain cortex also light up. So music really organizes the brain much differently than just the spoken word. And so I think it's really important to be, again, part of your lifestyle, and not necessarily kids kind of, sing-songy music, but fun music that you can play together and you can dance and really build it into your lifestyle. So think about that. Think, how can I introduce early music in my family with my children and have fun with it? It's all about having fun. Yes, and I wanted to include here something I found recently, a quote that human societies with no music, like human societies with no language, have never been found. And that was from a Harvard psychologist, Roger Brown. I found a documentation by Catherine Hull, who is a nationally certified music teacher, and she wrote in response to why teach music. And she says, music is science, music is mathematical, music is a foreign language, music is history, music is physical education. So there's so many elements to it that, again, I say when you share it with your family, when you share it with your little ones, it's a way to have fun together and connect. So it builds the brain, but it also builds that social connection. So number 6 would be crawling. And it goes to tummy time, of course, the next phase. I don't think these are really in any kind of hierarchy of most important to least important. I'm just kind of generating a list of my top 10. If I had to only pick 10, these would be that I think parents, especially new parents, really need to understand the importance of crawling. as equal to the importance of tummy time. Because I think we, in our fast pace world, we kind of rush through crawling. But crawling is a cross-lateral locomotion. It helps wire the brain, the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, upper motor neurons, lower motor neurons. It helps the brain build this network, this automaticity, and it really helps with balance and strength, visual spatial development, spinal alignment, because they're working both sides and their shoulders and their hips, social emotional development, because they're really wiring that left and that right hemisphere. And there are tissues, or a network is called corpus callosum, between the two hemispheres that have to communicate. Again, we don't do anything that is in these neat, tight little modules or these compartmentalized areas of our brain. That it's a system, it's a network system. And so crawling is critical to building above, with language, with motor, with all of this three-dimensional life that your little 8-month-old, because that's about the age that most kids should start to crawl. And so that means that from 8 months to about 12 months, which is average when they really start to walk as their primary means for movement. But that's giving them, 4 months of real good physical workout and neurological stimulation. And sometime in the very near future, I can't remember what my schedule is, but I do have a single episode just on crawling, but really looking, as I said, about the gross and the fine motor skills. It really helps strengthen the hands and the fingers, the wrists. All of that helps with the hand-eye coordination. I've said this here before, and I say this to parents almost every day. What is our end goal? Ultimately, we want them to be able to sit up at a desk and write or cut or put puzzles together. We want them to be able to have both physical and cognitive integration. And so, crawling also helps with understanding spatial concepts, that they're looking around in this. It's all on fours, of course, and so they have a different perspective of the world than when they're just sitting there and looking or being held and moved. And so they have the opportunity to learn to go around things or navigate an efficient path if they're having to go around furniture or people or toys. They also, crawling improves binocular vision. So where they have to reach for things and play with their eyesight and their body. What is close? What is far? Can I judge? How long can I get there in time before something disappears, before the doggy gets up and walks away? So there's so many different positive neurological and physiological development going on. So just consider crawling so much richer and deeper and worthy than just moving about, or I've talked before about it builds higher order language processing and helps support your baby to learn how to take risks, and to try to get over something. And if that doesn't work, and maybe I can get around it, and really help your child think in trying to move his body and interact with what's before him. So of course, on my top 10 would also be limited screen time. And that, really looks at when you're looking at all the time they need for tummy time and learning how to eat and chew and spending time playing music and reading with you and crawling around and playing games, there's not a whole heck of a lot of time for screens. But I know it's really going against what the average or the most common thought would be in this modern day world with young parents who grew up with screens literally at their fingertips. But it is not, and I repeat this over and over again, it is not healthy for a very, very young child. And I know the American Pediatric Association came out with, no TV or no screens. You can't even say TV anymore, right? But screens between birth and 2. I say birth and 3. There's no reason. With all honesty, I know it's hard. I know I'm going against almost every cell in your body. However, it is not good for language. It is not good for socialization. It is not good for attention. It is not good for problem solving. It is not good for peer relations. None of it. And the advertisers are lying through their teeth when they try to get you to watch this show or buy this thing or play this quote unquote game. So from my perspective, if I was a brand new parent, I would learn how to live without it when your baby is little. Our brains, our human bodies haven't evolved that much. We don't really need to put our children in front of a screen. They need speech and language, like I said. They need attention to learn how to build relationships, to problem solve, to build their curiosity, their physical movement. As I just mentioned, numbers 1 through 5. So consider that. That is just a recommendation, but it's high on my list. Number 8 would be to build routines. And I haven't talked a lot about what routines are and why they're important, but as a therapist, it's one of the things that I really investigate with each and every one of my families. What are your morning routines, your evening routines, your nap routines? How are you using routines to help your child build their understanding of how their day unfolds, so they don't feel like they're just being schlepped from here to there, or that they might be glued to your hip, particular days or times, but it really helps build their internal clock and helps establish some early self-regulation to understand how their daily events will unfold. And they begin to anticipate, oh gosh, when mom or dad come and greet me in the morning, we know that we're going to sing a little song, and then we're going to snuggle a little bit, and we're going to play and engage back and forth as they change my diaper. They're beginning to understand how one thing follows another. So bedtime, morning naps, dinner time, all of those routines help build flexibility. It helps, it builds flexibility because you have given them the stability to know that the world isn't going to fall apart if something has to change. And I know when we talk about kids who are hypersensitive or who have self-regulation issues, who may or may not be on the autism spectrum or just have developmental delays, having a meltdown or a breakdown if things change is hard for them. So what I'm suggesting, again, in my ideal parent package, is that parents understand from the get-go of how we can build routines. And if a child isn't responding to routines by the time they're 4-6 months, then you need to dig a little deeper. You need to figure out what's going on. But routines really help lay the framework for learning and language and engagement and all of these other opportunities to really grow and construct that brain, right? Again, I think in my first or second episode, I talk about how babies are born under construction, and it's up to us to help them really continue to build and that strong neurological system. So number 8 would be routines. Number 9, to narrate your day. And I know it's pretty popular, but I don't think that my organization, American Speech and Hearing Association, or pediatricians or educators, whoever you go to seek advice and counsel with, really explain what that means. And I will definitely have, a deeper dive into what is narrating your day. And it came from the mid to late 1970s, with a big study that has its pros and cons, and I will dive deep into that, but it's called the 30 million word gap. But narrating your day really basically means that you talk to your baby, you talk to your toddler, you talk to your preschooler, that in order for them to grow and develop and acquire language, there has to be role models, that we have to help them wire their auditory system. Remember, I have some phrases that I use all the time. One of them is, babies are citizens of the world, and we have to understand that they're ready to learn or decode, acquire any language. So there is a primary language. Yes, there are many people throughout the world that speak 2 or 3 languages, and that's fine. But here in the U.S., the primary family is one language. And so that's when you narrate and you really help them understand what you're doing and how you're doing it, and building their vocabulary, building their syntax and their grammar, and helping them. You're not talking above them. I often tell the story that when I first started out back in Pasadena, California, and there was a little guy, he was maybe 2 or 3, and mom and dad were both attorneys, and one was, a prosecutor, and one was, I'm not even quite sure, but they both had high expectations, if not unrealistic expectations. And they spoke to their son at the end of the day, like when they were fixing dinner, they would put him in their high chair, and they were almost examining him. They were just rattling off questions and talking. And I'm like, wait a second. That's not what having a narration or talking with your 2-year-old is all about. It's about, look, we're fixing up some broccoli. Broccoli is green. Here's some carrots. Carrots are orange. They're both vegetables. They are different, but they belong to the same family. Just like you and me, we belong to the same family, but we're different people. You can talk that way. You can have kind of higher order thoughts, but it's still pretty concrete in the now and present tense, right? But narration is also quality versus quantity. Now, I know that some parents are pretty uncomfortable just chatting with their baby or talking to a 2-year-old who really can't have a conversation. But keep in mind that it's quality over quantity, that a lot of the research that stemmed from the 1970s and 80s with the 30 million word gap really kind of distorted what the outcomes were. But I'm here to say it's about being positive and being present and being playful and engaged with your little guy or gal. And it's not about just rattling off directives or commands, but it's really about whatever we're doing together, we're going to talk about, whether it's a stinky diaper or he fell down and skinned his knee, or, you're trying to, learn how to put on your boots. It's all about giving purpose through language and helping them engage with you and use this beautiful system that we have, which is spoken language. So then that leads right into number 10, which is play with your baby, play with your toddler, play with your children at every phase. Play is the medium in which they learn and grow and develop. Play is the medium in which they can create, that they can problem solve, that they can build a curiosity, that they can learn how to share and build relationships. But I think it's hard because as we talk about this modern day lifestyle, the daycares, the preschools, the kindergarten programs are much more structured and much more busy, and not a lot of open-ended play. Yes, there's a little bit here and a little bit there, but in this modern day and age, what I would say to myself as a brand new parent is, let's look at the daycare and the preschool settings versus a home-based learning or homeschooling. And with all honesty, I would have to sit down with my partner and discuss what the pros and cons are, because that's how important play is. That's how important all of these are, numbered, 1 through 10, from, giving proper and quality tummy time, helping them transition from bottle fed to, adult food, helping them understand what routines are, or giving them ample time for real crawling and exploring their world in this physical space, enough one-to-one reading, and all of these things that are really the true foundation. So if I was a brand new parent, these top 10 would be my Bible, kind of my framework where I would dive deep. How important are they? How can I help facilitate and support and expand each and every one of these? And when it's not going my way, how can I, or where do I go and get advice and direction? Because I know a lot of parents, a lot of moms, really struggle with breastfeeding and bottle feeding or versus bottle feeding, and they need support. They need help. So those would be my 10: breastfed, tummy time, baby-led weaning, read, music every day, limited screen time, crawling, build routines, narrate your day, and play with your baby, toddler, and kids throughout their childhood. Those are my top 10, and I will dive deeper as we move along and continue this fun podcast of mine. I hope you are enjoying the information that I'm trying to share. I hope that it's meaningful to you, and Again, I really thank you for your time, because I know it's valuable. And it would be really meaningful to me and helpful if you could write a review, share it with your friends, your family, your pediatrician. Really help me spread the word and build this community right here on Talking Toddlers. So until next week, remember, list out these top 10 and play, sing, crawl. Enjoy this precious, precious baby that you have. It's a gift from God, and you can do this. All right, take care. See you next week. Bye.